When exploring animated movies and TV shows that are aimed primarily for adults, what has come to be expected from these types of shows is an abundance of gross-out humour, a plethora of innuendos, and an overabundance of graphic violence. Oh, and it has to be a comedy, apparently. More experimental shows like Futurama and Rick and Morty came along and showed that animated sitcoms can play around with subgenres like science fiction and still have the heart and bravery to tackle issues head-on without sacrificing the overall tone or genre of the show. BoJack Horseman is another show that deserves more recognition, and I'd love to cover that one day. For now, though, I recommend heading over to Shady channel. He's done a few videos on this show, and I highly recommend you check them out. The advantage that Futurama and Rick and Morty has, as well as this subgenre, is that for the most part, the story is spread across the seasons. Though admittedly, both shows have a lot of episodes that are there purely for filler. The other expectation is for the show to have at least one self-destructive character. Rick and BoJack are perfect examples. With shows like Family Guy though, where it is a parody and reference to 90s TV sitcoms, much like The Simpsons was, but let's face it, Simpsons modeled itself after The Flintstones, kind of obvious, since The Flintstones was the first animated sitcom to be aired at prime time. The main character, usually the father, is often shown to destroy everyone around him instead of himself, might it be emotionally or physically, intentionally or not. Meanwhile, the mother of the family is the straight man, picking up the pieces in the father's wake, suffering in silence. Marge Simpson is a perfect example of this, until she eventually did grow a backbone. In Family Guy and F is for Family though, both wives serve a purpose other than, hoovering around the feet of the dad while he watches TV, vegetating on the couch. In shows like Family Guy, it started off this way, but Lois eventually became just as self-destructive as Peter is, perhaps even more so. At least Peter has the excuse of being stupid. What is Lois's excuse? She is morally corrupt on purpose. Using taxpayers' money to buy herself a handbag, for example, when she was elected mayor, knowing full well that not only was it unethical, but also illegal. There are worse examples, but I'm going to go with this one purely for the sake of time. Family Guy first aired in 1999 and is set in the fictional city of Quahog, Rhode Island, and exhibits much of its humour in the form of meta-fictional cutaway gags, that is really lazy by the way, often lampooning American culture. It is the perfect definition of Schrodinger's cat animated show. It is both one of the best animated sitcoms and one of the worst, but we'll get into why in a moment. Let's first talk about F is for Family. For those that don't know, F is for Family streamed on Netflix in 2015 and is as much about emotional abuse as it is about breaking the mold of what animated shows for adults are and should be. On the surface, it looks nothing different from Family Guy. In fact, it looks like a blatant rip-off. Even Frank and Peter share similarities in their designs. Caucasian male, white shirt, glasses, balding hair, and stereotypically white and Jewish or Irish. For the most part, F is for Family really is nothing new. Not safe for work content is done irreverently, while never forcing it in there just for the sake of a joke or for shock value, like Family Guy does. It makes the viewer uncomfortable, but it makes the characters feel the same way. F is for Family is set in the 70s and is a brash, unfiltered look at middle-class family life. Frank Murphy, the father and patriarch of a 5-person nuclear family, works in middle management at an airport, where he's torn between pleasing the large group of employees 1 or 2 rungs below him and his powerful bosses promising him more power and money. That's another reason why F is for Family is better than Family Guy, because at least this guy can hold down a job for more than one episode. While his split loyalty takes up a good chunk of the show, the larger focus is on how his job affects those closest to him, with a strong emphasis on the affect part. While Family Guy can get away with more because it's not quite grounded in reality as much as F is for Family is, I feel the reason for Frank being an a-hole is far more justified. He served in Korea, so probably has severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Peter is an a-hole because it's easy to write a show where your main character is a stupid, idiotic man-baby, whose best quality is that deep down he is well-meaning. Apparently. Let's take that with a pinch of salt. Being set in the 70s, F is for Family can't rely on constant pop culture reference jokes or celebrity cameos or cutaway gags like Family Guy can. Instead, it relies on its own original storylines that run throughout the seasons, instead of being episodic. When I first started watching F is for Family, I thought it was like if Family Guy and King of the Hill had a baby and did nothing but spout emotional abuse at it until it burst a blood vessel. At least that's what it looks like to me visually. While Family Guy's focus is on a father who is essentially a man-child, who causes havoc for everyone around him, for no reason other than frustration and boredom, F is for Family focuses on a father who passes out abuse and somehow still makes him sympathetic without blaming it all on his own childhood, or because he's just bored. Probably because he uses the "I was in Vietnam" card a lot, because, let's face it, emotional and physical abuse is never funny, and should never be portrayed as funny, whether the show or movie be live action or animated. At the same time, post-traumatic stress disorder is not limited just to people who served in the military. You can get PTSD from a car crash, a house fire, or from living through an illness or injury that could have killed you. You can get PTSD from being bullied at school or work. My point here is, though PTSD in itself should never be made into a joke, and neither should abuse, we laugh at these things because it's a coping mechanism. This is why so many shows, especially comedy, tackle really dark themes. It can be used in storytelling, but it should never be used as a joke or cutaway gag like Family Guy does. That's basically diminishing serious life problems as something minuscule, saying that it's no big deal, it's just part of life and we should just accept it. We laugh at it not because it's funny, but because it is relatable. Long gone are the days of Homer Simpson choking his 10-year-old son and audience finding it funny. I never find that funny anyway. Child abuse is never funny, and the Simpsons need to be taken out to pasture. They haven't been funny since 1994. As for Family Guy, as far as I'm concerned, it should have ended after 5 seasons. If you start off a show like Family Guy having a baby trying to kill his own mother, and then several seasons later have an episode where they're trying to tackle domestic abuse in a serious way, and expect the audience to also take it seriously, no one is going to take you seriously. Especially when the same show does this.
What happened? One at a time, please.
This all gets a stuffing little fingers into my wallet and a slap it.
Joe, this isn't domestic abuse. This is hilarious.
This is one of your fantasies, right? Public humiliation?
Joe, this isn't domestic abuse. This is hilarious.
At least with F is for Family, it is grounded in reality and takes real issues and portrays them realistically without resorting to cutaway jokes or drastically changing the tone of the show just to make a point that a comedy show has no right to make whatsoever unless that is what it set out to do from the beginning, which Family Guy didn't. Family Guy has morphed into another show entirely. In fact, it has become Seth MacFarlane's mouthpiece. You can't have Roadrunner-like jokes with characters not getting hurt after falling out of a plane or getting run over by a car, and then have an episode where Stewie the baby is thrown down the stairs and splits his head open, and the characters act like they are shocked to see it. And you can't kill a character only to bring him back 2 episodes later either. But I guess that's a subject for another video entirely. Either that or hop over to Mysterious Mr. Enter's channel. He covers it much better than I will ever do. Death needs to mean something, and constantly mean that thing. You can't keep changing the rules and the tone of the show like this. How can you expect an audience to stay faithful to a show if the show itself can't stay consistent in its tone or faithful to itself? Imagine if Looney Tunes did this. Imagine for a moment that the 1950s Chuck Jones reiteration of the cartoon had one episode of Daffy Duck being shot several times only to wash it off as nothing, but have another episode where he gets shot and it's treated seriously and the characters react in a serious way. A complete shift in tone in the same iteration of the franchise. However, even Looney Tunes managed to make a tone change work in the episode What's Opera Doc. The ending of the cartoon is bittersweet and has Elmer react sadly to Bug's death, as opposed to irreverently when he shoots Daffy. Why does this tone change work? Because the episode itself established the tone change in the first place, but also because Daffy is the punching bag while Bugs is the hero, and Daffy doesn't appear in this particular episode. When the hero gets hurt, it is treated seriously. When a sidekick gets hurt, it is treated irreverently, because more often than not, they are not permanently harmed, and their pain is played up for comedy, and they end up perfectly fine in the next scene. If it was a different series in the same franchise, it would be okay, because tonally they would be different. But in the exact same show? No! Comedy is hard, but it also has rules. A good example of tone change in the same franchise would be the 90s Batman animated series and Batman Brave and the Bold. Both are the same franchise, but both have different tones and rules to their comedy. The 90s Batman series was more dramatic, while Brave and Bold was much more comedic. Both shows had a good grasp of their tone and stayed consistent. At least until season 4 came along and ruined everything, but that's for another video. When someone gets hurt in F is for Family, it feels painful and is treated seriously, with a level of irreverence. It can't be helped, it's animation. Family Guy shifts its violence tone from Looney Tunes logic to DC logic. F is for Family sticks to DC logic. It never has a Looney Tunes logic to the violence or comedy. When characters get hurt, they bleed. This includes the child characters, by the way. It doesn't restrain itself just because the characters are children, but it stays consistent. There's extreme violence, but comic violence is different. Pain cannot be taken seriously in animation unless the animation itself is realistic or that the characters in the show react to it in a serious way. Shock value is not enough. It's more about how the characters react to it than how it is visually portrayed. Like when Maureen falls out of a tree or splits her eye open while ice skating. We take the violence seriously because the characters around her do. The violence in itself is shocking, but we understand the tone that they're going for by seeing how the other characters react. Family Guy is not a bad show, but it is broken. It has become unrecognizable and too reliant on offending as many people as possible in as many different ways as possible, without caring about whether it has anything to do with the story or not. F is for Family keeps the story driving forward in every episode because the plot spreads out over the course of the seasons. Although Family Guy is episodic and you can leap into the show at any certain point, tonally the show is so inconsistent it's ridiculous. F is for Family is what Family Guy is trying to be now, except it keeps a consistent tone. If this show was set in the modern day, everything that this family goes through would have caused it to fall apart. Frank and Sue would be divorced, the kids would probably be in care or worse, dead, and their house would have been repossessed. There's something to be said about the endurance people had back in those days. It's something that isn't very prominent in today's society or in entertainment in general. Nowadays, if something breaks, you replace it. In the old days, if something broke, you fixed it. Family Guy is far too reliant on a convenient formula that was invented in the 70s and still used in the 90s. It replaces its own tone just to attempt to tackle an issue in a serious way while still making a joke out of it. What is the point of trying to be heartfelt when you're not going to attempt to show you mean business? F is for Family is a sitcom set in the 70s that relies on nothing but its own irreverence to tell a story, that still manages to take itself seriously while still managing to be primarily a comedy show. It has ridiculous moments, of course, that are played up for laughs, but these moments are swatted out of the air immediately, reminding us that drug use, alcohol abuse, and domestic abuse are never funny. The jokes here are about how cruel life can be, not how cruel a character can be to others. Life is the joke. Laugh at it while we try in vain to fix it. If you want to check out F is for Family, it's available on Netflix. In the meantime, I'm Mad Munchkin, stay creative.